Okay, so get this. North Korea and Russia, they signed a mutual defense treaty,
Yeah.
a pact that says if one gets attacked, the other jumps in to help.
Wow.
And, with everything going on in Ukraine right now, the timing is, well, it's raising some eyebrows for sure.
Definitely.
We've got some reports and analyses trying to break down what it all means, and even some direct quotes from Kim Jong-un and Zelensky. So today, we're diving into the big question. What does this new alliance really mean for global stability?
Right, because this isn't just like some regional thing.
No.
This could have much wider impacts.
Absolutely. So let's break it down. The treaty was signed back in June, just recently got ratified. It basically commits both countries to military and other aid if one of them is attacked. Kim Jong-un even called it, quote, alliance-like, which is,
Interesting.
yeah, interesting wording to say the least.
It is, it's definitely fascinating. North Korea and Russia, they haven't always been on the best of terms.
Oh, really?
Yeah, their relationship, it's been pretty up and down over the years.
So not exactly best friends then. What's changed recently to bring them to this point?
Well, you have to look at the bigger picture. The war in Ukraine has been a major catalyst, I think. Russia is finding itself increasingly isolated, and they're looking for allies, for any kind of support they can get.
Right.
And North Korea, facing sanctions and international pressure, they see this as an opportunity,
Yeah.
a chance to strengthen their own position,
I see.
and maybe even get some much-needed support from Russia, economic and military.
Right.
It's a bit of a, the enemy of my enemy is my friend situation,
Yeah.
wouldn't you say?
For sure, and it seems like that support is already starting to flow. There were reports of North Korean troops being sent to help Russian forces in Ukraine.
Mhm.
Some estimates say over 10,000 soldiers.
Yeah, and these aren't just rumors. Seoul, Washington, even Kiev, they've
Well,
confirmed these reports.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty clear sign that something big is happening.
Wow, 10,000 soldiers. That's a pretty significant number. What does it actually mean to have North Korean boots on the ground in Ukraine, potentially even engaging in combat? That seems like a major escalation.
Absolutely. It raises a whole bunch of questions.
Mm.
What are their goals? How involved are they going to get? And what does this mean for the future of the war? This could also draw in other players. For example, if North Korea starts supplying Russia with weapons, it could force other countries to take a stronger stance.
And it's not just hypothetical anymore. President Zelensky has even acknowledged casualties among North Korean forces, meaning they're directly clashing with Ukrainian troops. He even said this is a sign of growing global instability.
Yeah, Zelensky's statement, it really highlights the seriousness of this situation.
Mhm.
He's basically warning that this alliance and the troop deployment, it has the potential to throw the whole global power balance out of whack. And he might be right.
Yeah.
We need to remember that North Korea, it's a nuclear-armed nation.
Yeah.
So their direct involvement in a conflict with such global implications, it's a significant development.
So we're talking about potential ripple effects that go way beyond just Ukraine.
Exactly. This could embolden other actors, maybe even spark new conflicts, and completely reshape international relations as we know them. We have to ask ourselves, is this a sign of things to come? Are we heading towards a world where these kinds of alliances become more common, making conflicts even more unpredictable and dangerous?
Okay, this is a lot to process. We've got this new treaty, we've got North Korean troops potentially fighting in Ukraine, and we've got global leaders expressing serious concern. Where do we even begin to unpack all of this?
Well, I think the first thing we need to do is look back. Let's dive into the history of North Korea and Russia's relationship. It's been a complex one, full of twists and turns.
Sure.
But understanding the past can give us some valuable insights into the motivations behind this new alliance and what it might mean for the future. So you see, North Korea and Russia, they had this long history going back to the Cold War. They were both communist states, supported by the Soviet Union. But then after the Soviet Union collapsed their relationship, it got a bit more complicated.
So they were tight back in the day, but then kind of drifted apart. What happened?
Yeah, well, Russia tried to normalize relations with South Korea in the 90s, which North Korea did not like.
Right.
They felt betrayed, like Russia was choosing sides.
Ouch. So how do they go from that to signing a defense treaty?
Well, things started shifting again in the 2000s.
Yeah.
Russia was looking to assert itself more on the global stage, and North Korea was becoming more and more isolated because of its nuclear program.
Okay.
They both kind of saw an opportunity to use each other to achieve their goals.
Now, so they've got this shared history, but they've also had their differences. Now they're back in this alliance-like relationship. But with a lot more at stake, what are some of the potential consequences beyond just the military support?
One thing to consider is the economic impact. North Korea needs resources, technology, pretty much anything they can get.
Yeah.
Russia needs manpower and maybe even weapons systems
Yeah.
that they can't get elsewhere because of sanctions.
So this treaty is like a loophole, a way for them to bypass those sanctions.
Exactly. Imagine Russia paying for North Korean soldiers with fuel or food, things North Korea desperately needs,
Hmm.
that could undermine the effectiveness of the sanctions and potentially make it harder to pressure either country to change its behavior.
It's a bit like finding a secret tunnel under a border wall, right?
Hmm?
It kind of defeats the purpose of having the wall in the first place.
That's a great analogy. And this partnership also has political consequences. It's a major headache for countries like the U.S. and South Korea.
Right, because it's not just about two countries teaming up. It's about the bigger picture, the power dynamics.
Absolutely, this shift in power in the region. It doesn't favor the West.
Right.
It gives China another player to work with in its rivalry with the U.S., and for South Korea and Japan, who are already worried about North Korea's military ambitions. It creates even more security concerns.
So we're talking potential military escalation, economic loopholes, and a political power shift.
Okay.
A lot to keep track of. What are some possible scenarios that could play out here?
Well, in the best case scenario, the alliance stays focused on the conflict in Ukraine. It provides some limited support to Russia, but it doesn't drastically change the course of the war. Maybe the international community manages to contain things and prevent further escalation.
Okay, that's the optimistic view.
What about the not-so-optimistic outcomes? What's the worst-case scenario we're looking at here?
Things could get much messier. We could see North Korea emboldened to take more aggressive actions in the region, maybe provocations on the Korean peninsula, or even a renewed push for reunification on their own terms.
Right.
That would easily pull in South Korea, the U.S., potentially even China.
And that sounds like a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
What about on the Russian side of things?
The worst case there would be the conflict in Ukraine, spilling over into neighboring NATO countries.
Oh.
That would trigger Article 5, which is the part of the NATO agreement that says an attack on one is an attack on all.
Right.
It would basically force the entire NATO alliance into a full-blown war with Russia.
Right. And with North Korea now considered an ally of Russia, things could spiral out of control very quickly.
So on the one hand, we could see this contained to Ukraine. But on the other hand, it could blow up into a much larger conflict, even a global war.
Exactly. And it's impossible to predict which way it will go. But understanding the different possibilities helps us prepare for what might come next.
Okay, so we've talked about the historical context, the potential consequences, and some possible scenarios. But I think we need to zoom out for a second and think about what this all means for us, for everyday people trying to make sense of this whole situation. Zelensky said this is a sign of growing global instability. He's not just talking about Ukraine, is he?
No, he's talking about a much bigger problem, the weakening of the rules-based international order that we've had for decades,
Right.
the rise of authoritarian leaders, and countries being more willing to use force to get what they want.
So it's almost like this North Korea-Russia alliance is a symptom of something much deeper, a sign of the times we're living in.
Exactly. It shows that the world is changing. And the old ways of doing things might not work anymore.
So what does that mean for the average person? What are we supposed to do with this information?
Well, you don't need to start building a bunker in your backyard just yet. But it does highlight the importance of staying informed and engaged. This situation has the potential to affect everyone, and understanding what's at stake is crucial.
So we're living in uncertain times that much is clear. Where do we go from here? What are the things we should be watching for as this whole situation unfolds?
Well, one important thing to keep an eye on is the level of military cooperation between North Korea and Russia. Are we seeing large-scale transfers of weapons or technology? Are North Korean troops taking on a more active combat role in Ukraine? Those are all signs of how serious this alliance really is.
And what about the rest of the world? Surely there's some pushback against this alliance, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The U.S. and its allies are already trying to tighten sanctions against both North Korea and Russia. They're also sending more military aid to Ukraine and trying to bolster defenses in the region. But the big question is, will it be enough to stop things from escalating further?
And what about China? They've been trying to walk a fine line throughout this Ukraine conflict. How might this alliance impact their strategy?
That's a great point. China wants stability in the region, but they also see a chance to gain more influence. They're trying to support Russia without completely alienating the West. This new alliance throws a wrench into their plans. They don't want a stronger North Korea right next door, but they also don't want to push Russia further into the arms of the West. It's a delicate balancing act.
So lots of moving pieces, lots of uncertainty. It sounds like we're in for a period of, as you said, heightened risk. It makes you wonder what could the long-term consequences of this alliance be, especially for East Asia and Europe.
Well, this could potentially lead to a new kind of Cold War, with different blocs of countries forming. Or it could even lead to something entirely new, something we haven't even thought of yet. One thing is for sure, though, this alliance has the potential to destabilize the global order that we're used to. It's a stark reminder that the world is becoming increasingly interconnected, and that conflicts, no matter how far away they seem, can have ripple effects felt around the globe.
That's a sobering thought. It sounds like we're going to have to stay tuned and see how things play out. Thanks for helping us unpack all of this. It's been a fascinating, if a little unsettling, deep dive.
You're welcome. It's
Yeah.
always a pleasure to break down these complex issues with you. And remember, staying informed is the first step in navigating these uncertain times.